iHeart and iTunes podcast station. And you can catch us here on our YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter page to ask questions about. You be the judge. I'm with attorney at law Marylin Pierre, Esquire, and boy, do we have stuff to talk about with the storming of the. I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where my heart needs to start, except for how are you doing? Happy New Year.
I am doing well. Happy New Year too. I hope you and your family the best in 2021.
Yeah. So, uh, being an attorney, this is unprecedented, right? This has got to be the most unprecedented. We know we've been hearing it since it started that this is so unprecedented. We don't even know what to call it besides unprecedented.
Well, I'm not sure that's true because don't forget we learned about our history in terms of the revolutionaries were the heroes.
That's
So
right.
we can look at it from that lens. I'm not saying we should. I'm saying that some people are looking at it from that lens, saying that, they're revolutionaries. And don't forget that they say one person's revolutionaries, well, I'm sorry, one person's freedom fighter is another's terrorist.
And,
So
and I and I do agree with that. I do agree with that because being in the military, we were definitely called terrorists in other countries because of the things we did.
yeah,
And I was actually telling someone today. I said I don't mind none of this because this is democracy. You know what I
yes,
mean? Because if you want to say this isn't democratic, actually, it really
it is.
sort of is. I mean,
It's one of the most democratic things that could happen. I mean, we might not agree with it,
right,
and
right.
definitely we're hoping that no one gets hurt. But I think part of what is happening as well is we see that there could be marches and protests that aren't necessarily peaceful, and the police know how to handle it without, hurting people and well, and doing some of the things that they claim that they had to do in the past. So it's nice to look at it through that lens as well.
Should we also not should, and I don't mean to use that word should as being such a definitive thing. Um, this protest was very much handled differently than other protests that we have seen them handle with the type of militant that was allotted. Why, you know, basically, if there was a bunch of black people doing this, there would have been a whole army of armed guards there, right? But it
Well,
wasn't.
that's why it's nice to look at it from that lens,
Right,
because then
right.
when we are told that, oh, we have to do this because that's the way we keep people in line, that's the way we keep the peace, we could say no, actually there's an example where it was worse than this and you were still able to keep people in line and there still wasn't the amount of violence on your side as there could have been. And I find it interesting as well that one of the things I don't want buried in all of what's going on, is the decision not to try the police officer in the Jacob Blake shooting.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to get to that. And let's go backwards and let people
Okay.
know who Jacob Blake was, what transpired. I wish I could just bring up a video, but we'll it's a Jacob Blake shooting. He got
Mm,
shot in the back. They said he was going into his SUV and they found a knife on the floor. That's what happened. You take it from there.
well, according to the prosecutor, now the knife was in his hand and he turned towards the police officer. And it is really hard to to discuss these issues. They say that, I mean, miraculously, this young man who was shot in the back 7 times,
7 times.
yeah, survived. They said that he is in a lot of pain every single moment of the day, but he is still among us. So that's he probably won't be able to walk again, but he is still among us. And this is someone who Yeah, the prosecutor says, hey, we think that the police officer had reasons to be afraid.
Afraid.
And then I go back again to what's happening today on Capitol Hill, because you hear that, there was a gunshot there, people had axes and they had pitchforks, which to me seems a little bit more than
Aggressive.
the small knife. I think even the prosecutor described it as a small knife.
But we didn't.
And
It had to be small because we didn't see it on the video.
yeah, like you said, I don't I that when the prosecutor talked about it, that was the first that I heard of a knife being, of anything being in his hand.
Ever. Right.
And yeah, it's really really sad. But I'm hoping, what I'm hoping from this as a silver lining is that when police officers say that, hey, we had to do this because we were afraid, you could then show them what happened. Well, we could show them what happened on Capitol Hill and say, okay, but look at these two different scenarios. How come, you weren't afraid to use deadly force on this one, but you were afraid to use deadly force on this one?
Well,
It's much milder.
someone from our viewer said that a woman was killed today. I
Oh, I
believe
heard she was shot. I didn't know that
yeah,
she
I
was.
believe she was
Oh,
shot in the
wow.
neck, but I didn't know she died. So thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm
So
sorry to hear that.
I'm
Wow.
I'm sorry to hear about anyone dying for any
Hmm.
reason, especially violence. So I wonder how people think about this democratic showcase or this
Hmm.
democracy showcase. I know there's a lot of people upset by this because of how things were shown, but isn't this the right of being a democratic state? Because if it was a different type of state, communist or otherwise, a lot of people would be dead.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Yeah. And I think about countries like France, where they used to regularly protest things. Oh, you want to bring up the fare on the metro? Okay, fine. We're not going to go to work this week until you decide that you're going to, keep the fares at whatever level they are now. You want to change the work days so that there be more hours to work. No, we're just going to protest. And I always found that refreshing about them. So I agree with you in terms of, yes, this is an opportunity for us to show that we actually live in a democracy. And and that's some of the consequences of a democracy. And like I said, it's sad that this woman got killed. We don't want anybody to get killed. We don't want anybody to get injured, but protesting is as First Amendment as you could get.
Yeah. Now we also thought, see, now people misunderstand the First Amendment, right? They say it is the freedom of speech, and that's not how the First Amendment really reads, is it?
Well, it does talk about speech, but then it also, I guess, incorporates in that action as well. Like for instance, there have been cases involving high school students in terms of what T-shirts they're allowed to wear, uh, what what they could do uh, in terms of silent protest. And so the First Amendment doesn't just encompass what you say or what you write. It also it's also visual protest. And of course, we hear a lot about the flag burning,
Right.
and some people think that that's a First Amendment. That's their way of protesting, and other people think that it's treason to burn the flag. So
Now,
yeah,
I was told that the First Amendment is it just can't stop you from doing, but they can arrest you for inciting something because of what you said. So if I want to
well,
say
for
something
inciting
hostile,
violence, yes, uh-huh.
right, they can't stop me from saying it, but they can arrest me because I say it, or they can detain me because of what I said.
Well, you can't incite violence. Okay, I'm looking at the First Amendment. The First Amendment provides that Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting its free exercise. It protects the freedom of speech, freedom of the press, assembly, and the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So the free speech part of the First Amendment is not absolute. There are some restrictions. The courts have said that you cannot yell fire in a crowded theater, which means that you can't do something to put other people's lives in danger. And with that comes the right to, well, the fact that you cannot use your First Amendment to incite violence. I'm thinking about, oh my goodness, I forgot his name. With the Southern Poverty Law Center. Yeah. Oh, I have his. Okay, let me try to see if I could. Um, yes, Southern Poverty Law Center has won several cases involved against the Ku Klux Klan and other uh, far right organizations, where they have proved to the courts that uh, the leaders were inciting violence with their speech. And so actually it's a really interesting take on the law, because they have actually bankrupted some organizations by doing that. Morris Dees, that's what I was thinking about. Yeah,
So,
and
so,
Montgomery, Alabama. Yeah, they have actually won several cases against far right organization. And by doing that, and by getting money judgment against those organizations, since the organizations were not able to win, I'm sorry, we're not able to pay the judgments, the organizations then went bankrupt.
so
That's an interesting way of getting rid of them. Oh, and the founders of the Southern Poverty Law Center is Morris Dees, Jill Levin, and Julian Bond.
so let's go with this. Let's go with, if you can actually be charged with things you say for inciting violence, like you just said about the Ku Klux Klan, then that actually puts President Trump on the hot seat for the things that was said, or is it now going to be how it was interpreted about what he said?
Well, that is going to be a point of discussion for years to come. I see that as a huge issue, because what has been going on in terms of uh, people, not just him, because he has many people who have agreed with him, saying that basically, if I don't get the results that I want, forget about the law, forget about people's rights, forget about the people who actually received the votes that they wanted. We are going to stay in power anyway, and we're basically going to stay in power by any means necessary. And that's what's been happening. I mean, we heard the phone call on Monday. Was it Monday or Sunday? Saying that, find me some votes. You miscounted. Yes, you've counted 3 times, but you miscounted, you know. And I don't even understand his fixation with Georgia. I didn't get that, because I said, even if the Secretary of State said, yes, oh yes, you're right. You know what? We miscounted. Here's a bag over there with 200,000 votes. You did win after all.
Yours.
So what? He still doesn't get the 270 electoral college votes. I don't get it. It's like, you know.
So
I thought it was an attention getting, you know.
So now we're going to go to ask, because I had a question that came up in my mind and my heart this week, and it was about how are you able to remove someone from your home who could be having violent outbursts towards kids or the spouse, but there's no court records, there's no doctor's note, there's nothing to say that this person is XYZ. So how can you get them out of the house?
I think that is a very wonderful question, because it does talk about some of the things that I wanted to talk about. I think that in this time, we have to make sure that we take care of ourselves and we do not consume too much of what's going on, because it is not healthy for us to consume everything that's going on right now, and the way that it's being handed to us, we really don't have an opportunity to take care of ourselves and protect our mental health. And to answer your question specifically, the Montgomery County Crisis Center is very helpful in situations like this. I had an opportunity to call them today, and so I did speak to them. Let me give the phone number to people who want their help. Their phone number is 240-777-4000. Again, 240-777-4000. They're open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And if someone is having a problem in terms of a family member having a mental health crisis, they could bring the person to the crisis center, which is located at 1301 Picard Drive in Rockville. If for whatever reason they cannot bring the person there because the person doesn't want to come, they could, the crisis center has a mobile unit where the mobile unit will come to the person. And yes, they are accompanied by the police, but I think now the police are much more sensitive than they used to be in situations like that. And, we could hope for the best.
Well,
Uh,
see,
it,
doesn't that oppose the problem in itself? Is that it has to be in crisis. So and if a person's calmed down
mhm.
prior to this rescue to the house, what is then? Now it's why did you call us?
Oh no, I think that because they understand that these things ebb and flow,
Okay.
that they're not going to say, oh, okay, now the person is not in crisis. That's why they have mental health providers 24 hours a day, seven
Okay.
days a week, 365 days a year. So they are always open, and they're always available by telephone. And the mobile unit is also always open. So if the mobile unit is there and the person is not in crisis, they could then evaluate the person and see, oh, okay, this is what just went on before we got here, or this is what happened yesterday, or whatever the situation is, and they could help the person that way.
And
So,
I
so
think
that should be the first step. And if you're a Montgomery County resident, everything is free in terms of the mental health evaluations. The referrals are free. It's a wonderful source of help that we have in the county.
and that's a great resource because I don't think, when I was thinking of this, I did not even know, me and another person was talking about this, and I'm like, I really have no idea, because we tend to think that if the person's not episodic or has not been diagnosed, getting them to the hospital or getting someone to say, hey, this person needs mental help and they need to go to the hospital. They don't need to be shot. They don't need to be tasered. They just need mental health.
Yes, exactly, and that's what we've been. It's so sad, and because we have this sort of news where if it bleeds, it leads,
Yes, right.
and so it makes us so concerned about things that we don't necessarily have to be concerned about when you think about the odds of it. I'm thinking about. Have you seen the movie Bowling for Columbine?
I haven't. I haven't.
Yeah, it's a really interesting movie because it talks about how we are not involved in social activities as much as we used to be. There used to be a bowling league, there used to be kids at Boy Scouts. Let's not talk about the Boy Scouts and what they were doing, but Girl Scouts, the knitting club. I mean, you name it. People used to do more social activities with one another. Nowadays, we're not doing. I mean, not just because of COVID. I mean, because of COVID now. Oh my gosh, I don't even know what people do in terms of social activities. But even before COVID, we were not doing things together. And so because of that, we're kind of fragmented. And part of the help that we used to get from one another, part of the things that used to happen in terms of people being able to see some activities that they were concerned about and being able to address it with the person. We don't get that anymore. And so in a situation where you need help, if you need help with a crisis, with the crisis center is there to help you. And like I said, give whatever referrals that you might need. So it's a good source to.
With COVID, and we hear of new strains coming, we hear vaccines not being administered, or we have a problem with that across the country. And we definitely have a
Yes.
problem with that in Maryland, that the vaccines are at places to be distributed, and yet they're still not getting shots. That's a bureaucratic government issue. It's not a people issue.
Yes. Well, I think part of it as well is that there needs to be trust in the system. It is hard
It is hard.
to, trust a system who time and time again has said to you that, hey, take this, trust me. And
Right.
then it has not been in your best interest to trust. So yeah. Yeah. Oh, and I lost the point that I was trying to make with Bowling for Columbine. Sorry, but the point that I was trying to make is that in the news over here, it always has to be fantastic to, like we were talking about. We started this morning, talking about Jacob Blake, and we talked about the Georgia races and.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. So both of them have been announced, and but
That's
anyway,
incredible. We haven't had this in 15
I
years.
mean,
This is
Stacey
amazing.
Abrams deserves a Nobel Prize or something. I mean, oh my gosh, this woman. I mean, she's incredible. Her life story is incredible, and her leadership is excellent. So we started talking about that, and yet I think tomorrow all we're going to be talking about is what has been going on. So what happens is that we get the chaos. We're all,
Yeah.
and so we don't get an opportunity to really reflect on some of the things that really affect us about the news. And Bowling for Columbine, of course, it's an older movie. Michael Moore talks about how, because we're so disconnected, that's one of the reasons why the Columbine shootings happen. And
Well,
also,
I've been saying that for years. I've
yeah,
been saying that
it's
for
a
years.
really good movie. It might be a little bit dated, but I still think that some of the premises hold true. He talks about the news in Canada, and I don't know if the news in Canada has changed. And he talked about how the news in Canada at that time was milder, to the point where people would leave their doors unlocked. And he even went to someone's house and just opened the door, and there the door was unlocked. I mean, could we imagine having our doors unlocked in this country?
Well, at a time,
because we're so afraid because of what we hear in the news.
but I do have to say, at a time when
I'm sorry.
I do have to say, at a time when I was growing up, our doors were not locked, and that's because we knew our neighborhood. We knew our neighbors, and I maybe people don't feel safe in their own neighbors, not neighborhood, but neighbors. If you don't, and that goes to what your point is, disconnected. If you're that disconnected from your neighbors, you're going to shut them out emotionally, mentally, and physically. Now, I'm not, if you know your surroundings, yeah, there are transient people that might come to your door, but that's so far and few between during the daylight. At nighttime, lock your door. But if you know your neighbors and neighborhood, I don't think you're that afraid to not keep your door unlocked.
I don't know, because I watch the news, and if there's nothing sensational happening around here, but there's something sensational happening in, you know, Kalamazoo. They will open up with what's sensational happening, and they make it feel like it's right next door to you.
That's true.
So I think there's part of that. Before, we did not have that capability. So if something happened in Kalamazoo, we were like, oh, we don't know about it. And by the time it got to us, there it was like, oh, by the way, 3 months ago this happened in Kalamazoo, and people were like, oh, okay, that's so sad, as opposed to it's happening now, and here are the pictures, and we're going to show you some things that are disturbing, but we're going to show it to you anyway. So it's so intense, which is why I really think it's important to put the devices down, turn them off, and just take some time off for yourself, because once it gets in your head, sometimes it's hard to get those pictures out.
Now, I have a question now. President-elect Biden just announced his attorney general, right?
Oh, I haven't heard who.
Well, it's the senior judge here in DC that sits on the circuit court. He's like 68 years old. I think let me see if I can catch his name. Let me bring it up here. Joe Biden.
Oh, okay, so Attorney General nominee. Okay, let's see. Merrick Garland. Okay,
yes,
he was at the top of the list.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, what do you think of him? What are your thoughts? Where does he stand? What type of cases that you know of, if know of any, how he presided, and where does he kind of fit?
I don't know much about him. I know that one of the reasons why he was nominated to the Supreme Court by President Obama was because he was considered a moderate.
Yes.
And that was, and so President Obama thought that he could, because he was considered a moderate, he could peel some of the Republicans off, and they would vote for him, and he would be on the Supreme Court. I have heard some glowing things about him from everybody that, who has an opinion on him. I haven't heard anything negative at all. And I know from what I've heard about him that he's going to consider himself the Attorney General of the United States, meaning the people, instead of the Attorney General of the President, which is two different things. And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to having an Attorney General who represents the people, as opposed to somebody who feels like they need to represent the president.
Now, in this president's term, we just might get another Supreme Court Justice nominee. Do you believe that might happen?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Clarence Thomas, who's the oldest on the court, if I remember correctly, says that he's not leaving. He's not going anywhere. He's going to have to go head first, is what he says.
Yeah.
So he is not leaving. But things happen. I'm not saying with him, but I'm saying, things happen that we don't know about. And so, but oh my gosh, I really, really miss Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was such a wonderful person. I had an opportunity to meet with her 3 times and twice in her chambers. And she is the most sensitive, cordial, just respectful. And she is so, I'm sorry, I'm talking about her in the present. She was so in love with the law and teaching people about the law. And she was also in love with one of my favorite people, Thurgood Marshall.
Yes.
And so she expressed that to me as well. And, I had a chance in her later years, she had Thurgood Marshall's former chambers. And the last time I was in her chambers, that's where we were. And I was, oh my gosh, she was just such an absolutely wonderful person. And
if you could step in,
her replacement, I don't know.
If you could step into Thurgood, and if he was here today and his thoughts of what America is at or where it can go to, what do you think some of his ideas would fit right now? Because he was very progressive in a lot of his thoughts
Mhm.
and his writings. His court, he was straightly down the line, but his writings, he was very progressive. So what do you think he would be thinking this time? If you could.
I don't know if he was straight down the line, because he used to tell his law clerks, be ready to write some dissents. And I think that he was just ahead of his time. The reason why I say that is because Hugo Black, who was on the court with him, who was also a, what was it? What was it? He, well, I'm trying to remember he was a former head of the Ku Klux Klan in Alabama. Hugo Black was, and Hugo Black and him, used to basically be on the same side on many issues. And it's kind of interesting because now Hugo Black's family is saying that is trying to do some revisionist history and say, hey,
Rewrite history.
oh, okay, that's what he was. He was a grand marshal of the KKK. That's what Hugo Black was. And but now, because he uh, ruled so many times with the same way that Thurgood Marshall, who is Mr. Civil Rights, did. His family is like, oh, by the way, we've got some revisionist history going on, and he was actually ahead of his time too. Yeah, but no. And when I talk about that, I talk about it in terms of leadership, because people say that leadership might not really matter, but I think it is really, really important. I think what's going on today has a lot to do with leadership, because if our leaders were to say, hey, well, or we're saying, oh, this is really sad. I'm really upset. I did not get the votes that I wanted, but the people have spoken, and we must respect what the people have said. We would not be having what we're having there today, but instead some people were saying, hey, we were robbed and there's something that we could do about it.
I think mobs breeds criminals, and I think leaders will come out of fire, and we will end up eventually. I don't know who that leader would be. I think we all need to be our own individual leaders in our own way, and decide and listen, and to have discernment, and to have patience, and yet still be active and not be so passive, but and then still perform our democratic duties of the republic, and that is to express yourself, but in a respectful way that we can do, and that is to hear others and see others. But when we don't want to hear anybody, we don't want to see anybody, then that's just violence. So,
and I think also our education system need to talk about more critical thinking, because that's what I think is missing. When I came into this country, I was 10 years old. And I learned very quickly that you ask very few questions. And then you have to ask, if you do have a question, you have to ask it in a way where the teacher doesn't feel threatened, or that you're disagreeing with the teacher or something like that. And this was something that was very difficult for me, because when I was in Haiti, it was the opposite way. We used the Socratic method a lot, which is why it was so easy for me in law school, because they used the Socratic method as well. And so you constantly, challenging what you're being told. Why is it that it has to be, why is it that you say it's like that? Does it have to be like that? Is there a better way of doing it? Is there a way to include more people? Is there a way to make it better for more people? Things of that sort. But if you start asking those questions, like I said, people just some teachers feel like you're challenging them, and they don't agree with what you're saying, and they just, but I do think it is a skill that's extremely necessary to learn, because I don't understand how some of the people who are who are going against our government right now are doing it for the people who they think they're doing it for. I mean,
Right.
I could understand if they were doing it for somebody who had their best interest in mind. At least then you could, it's logical. But the people they're doing it for do not have their best interest in mind, but somehow they have convinced themselves that they do.
Well, I tell you, Miss Marylin, we love talking about the law. We want people to ask some legal questions. If you have any legal issues that you want to discuss and find out what is the insides and outsides, please, you be the judge. It's a time for you to come in, talk to us, email us, text us, put it in the comments and say, hey, the next time you guys come on, can you please talk more about this? You be the judge here. Every Wednesday we're here, and I've taken up Marylin's life, and
Mhm.
and she comes in
But
and
I
she's so
have but
great.
one life to live, and I'm giving it to you. So, and our, viewers. But
Yes.
I do think it's quite important, though. I'll tell you that in my law practice, what I've been doing lately is I've been doing a lot of wills and trust and probate and things of that matter because people have been putting their affairs in order. So if anybody want to talk about that next week, that would be a good topic to talk about. Send your questions in, and I could respond as best as I can to that because it's really important at the beginning of the year when people are making their resolutions. They also, resolve to put their affairs in order. And with COVID-19, people
It's
have been
important.
doing that more and more.
All
Mhm.
right. Thank you, Marilyn. And I wish everyone a great, be safe. We'll see everybody next Wednesday. Please, we love to hear from you. And if there's any questions, please contact us. Thank you, Marilyn. You have a great and safe night, and I'll be talking to you later.
Thank you, Dr. Dyer. It's always such a